Pam, if you'll call the roll, please.
Okay, Commissioner Gershenson,
Here.
Angel,
Here.
Zach,
Here.
Quarles.
Oh, you're muted, Nancy.
Commissioner Quarles, unmute.
If you scroll down to the bottom of the screen, your mic should be there. And then you can unmute yourself.
It'll appear as you scroll down.
Okay. I just finished the roll.
Okay, Spiz,
Here.
Woodward,
Here.
we have a quorum.
All right. And let the record reflect that Nancy still is here, and if staff can circle back with her to make sure she can turn her mute button off. But Commissioner Quarles is with us. Next up with the Pledge of Allegiance. So everyone please rise. And we'll begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic and one for all.
Nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
That moves us on to approval of the minutes from the April 8th meeting that we had. Moved by Commissioner Zach, seconded by Commissioner Spiz. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed say nay. The minutes are approved unanimously. Moves us on approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda? Moved by Commissioner Gingell, seconded by Commissioner Zach. Any discussion on the agenda? Seeing none. All in favor of approving the agenda say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. The agenda is approved unanimously. That brings us to public comment. And so I'm going to recognize Andrea Powers, who has been collecting with and will interface for all public comment for this meeting. Andrea, do we have any public comment?
We do. We have one email, and we currently have no public comment that's dialed into the phone line or the video portion. So the one that we received on email is longer than 3 minutes, so I can set my timer and get through as quickly as possible and then submit the rest for public record, if that's all right with you.
That would be great, Andrea.
Okay. So I will.
John Carlson.
Yes. Andrea? Go ahead.
Mr. Chair.
What? Hello? Who?
All right, Mr. Chair, this is Ross Gavin from the Treasurer's Office. Just wondering if I could have a quick secondary public comment.
Certainly. Let Andrea go, and then we will create space for public comment for Mr. Gavin.
Okay, thank you very much.
Andrea?
Okay. I'm starting my timer for 3 minutes. The email reads, my name is Scott Glenn. I've been a resident of Oakland County for the past 30 years, with the last 3 being Oregon. I'm an executive with a publicly traded management consulting firm, a father of 3 teenage sons, and a coach of 14 youth travel baseball. I consider myself a middle of the road when it comes to politics. I tend to be more liberal on social views and conservative when it comes to economics. In the matter of the coronavirus, I consider myself a very rational person. I've been practicing social distancing and teaching my sons to do the same. Other than going to the grocery store at most once a week, we do not do anything that puts us near other people. We communicate with other friends and family online. 2 of my sons are college age, and I've told them it's likely their classes will continue to be virtual into the fall semester. I've told my son in high school that he will also likely be taking classes from home for the rest of the year. We love going to concerts and Tiger games and recognize it's unlikely we'll either do this year. We understand that having large groups of people in close proximity is not something we can return to for some time. I often travel to work, and I know it will be a while before I'm back on the plane. Well, this said, I still believe it's time for us to begin planning a transition plan to be able to start returning to a new normal. I do not believe the restrictions in place currently are our best interest statewide. I ask that our team in Oakland County share this with our state leaders. I also ask that communicate to be successful for our transition plan must delegate more local communities, whether it's at the county, city, or township level with basic guidelines and recommendations from the state, Local communities should be empowered with decision-making, but also be held accountable for monitoring, measuring, and communicating. While this virus impacts the entire state and has risks for everyone, I believe the level of risk and appropriate mitigation strategies and timing will be vary greatly by region, city, and county. I've stated I know that we will be ready in Oakland County for our children to return to school by September. In more rural areas of the state, it may be much less risk, and for those parts of Michigan, online learning may be a greater challenge. Even with Oakland County, the difference between the number of cases in the city of South Bearla are far greater than those in Lake Orion and should be a consideration in transition. Allow businesses to present plans for reopening in a manner that minimizes risks. This should include allowing larger stores to be free to sell everything in their store, provided they are mitigating risk. This is something I'm very passionate about. Companies providing landscaping services seem to be minimal risk. I can't understand why they're not permitted to operate. Communicate what you see as the risk to the owners and have them provide their mitigation approach. We have local stores that sell plants that are seasonal and will suffer if they cannot reopen soon. There is no reason that they shouldn't be allowed to open, but with restrictions on the number of people can be the facility at a given time. Maybe it's by appointment only. Likewise, if I want to buy something at my local Meijer or Home Depot, the restriction should be on how many people are shopping, not what I can or cannot purchase. Having our government tell us what we can and can't purchase is a serious infringement on our rights. What's essential is very subjective. That's the end of my 3 minutes that I could get through in the email. We'll have to submit the rest in public record.
That would be great. Thank you, Andrea. And it's, I know I received that email, and I believe most of the commissioners did. And if not, we can also just make sure it's sent to all the commissioners in the committee, but we will make it a matter of public record. And let's take the extra step to make it part of the public record that we will receive and file for the board as well, so that all commissioners have it.
Thank you.
Would you like to take a motion to receive and file for?
Sure. Moved by Commissioner Gingell, second by Commissioner Quarles to receive and file that email communication under public comment communications. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. That passes unanimously. All right. We also had Mr. Ross Gavin on, and so Mr. Ross Gavin, the floor is open to you to give a comment to the committee. Please keep your comments to 3 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. As I said, my name is Ross Gavin, and I'm with the County Treasurer's Office. I just wanted to comment very briefly on the item dealing with the DTRF. The Treasurer apologizes for not being able to be on the call this morning, but he did ask that I share as the administrator of the DTRF. The management of it has contributed greatly to the AAA bond rating and just helping to keep the local units of government solvent. We're happy to continue helping the county's finances and certainly, as always, just welcome the commission's collaboration. So thank you for the time this morning, and I certainly hope that you and all your families there are staying healthy during these uncertain times. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Gavin. Appreciate it. Is there any other further comment? Andrew, I'm gonna do one last call to see if anyone's tapped into the line.
No one else has joined since we began public comment.
Okay, great. All right, seeing no additional public comment, I'll declare public comment closed, and that will bring us to communications on the agenda. Sorry, I keep turning my head because my agenda is to my left here. So let me move this so it's easier. So can I get a motion to receive and file the communications? Moved by Commissioner Spid, seconded by Commissioner Quarles, to receive. We have 3 items: fiscal year 2020 to 2022 contingency report, letter regarding the comprehensive audit financial report, Michigan Department of Health and Human Service Board minutes dated March 23rd, 2020.
Mr. Chair, you also had your latest expense reports on COVID added to the packet. And then the add-on as well.
It's an add-on, yes. Okay, thank you, Mr. Ward. So I have 4 items: A, B, C, and D. Is there any discussion on any of those communications? We've got county staff and others. Commissioner Gingell.
Yeah, just for clarification on item D, what exactly is that? Because I'm looking at the agenda that I just pulled up online thinking it was the most recent agenda. I'm still not seeing an item D under communication. It's the
So the-
COVID-19 expenditures. Is there any explanation on that?
The agenda itself was not updated, but we added the item that was emailed out to you on Sunday from Mr. Carlson for your information to be received and filed. So,
I do have a question on one of those items.
so if this is an appropriate time for the
can we-
committee to discuss it,
Can you, Chris,
pleasure
can
of the
you,
committee.
yeah, can you send that out to send that to the committee members right now, so it's in front of them? And we
Sure.
will include that as item D.
By
um,
email, Mr. Chair?
By email, yeah, and then we will include it as receive the communications. And then to make sure that all commissioners have it in front of them right now.
Or
I
would
think,
you like the page number?
oh, is it attached to the back end of the agenda?
It should be in the agenda. Let me get the page number for you.
That'll
In the
work.
packet. It should be in the packet. I believe it's added to the packet. Let me double check that and I'll be right back with you.
In the meantime, Commissioner Spiz, I think you have questions as it relates to the reports on how we're spending the COVID money. Commissioner Spiz.
Yeah,
the floor
item D, if you look at the COVID expense that Mr. Carlson set out on Sunday,
is- Mhm.
page 1 of that, which was the current report dated for 16/2020. And at the first line, the salary, hazard pay through end 410. If you look at page 2, that also says through end of 410. I think one of those dates is incorrect. Because the amounts are completely different. One's 485,000, one's 4.5 million.
Okay.
So I don't think the durations are correct. So I'm just looking for clarification.
Got it. Okay.
Most-
I believe
What
Mr. Carlson,
should be.
Mr. Carlson, I believe you're on.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get to the exact report. I think I know what Mr. Spiz is asking, but if he can restate his question, I'd appreciate that.
Let's see, open it back up. The first line item of the report, it says the report is the county COVID-19 analysis report as of 4/16/20. The first section says current report 4/16/2020. The first line item of that portion states pay end 4/10/2020. But the total cost is 4.5 million. If you go down to the second section, which is prior report, which is 4/9/2020. It has the same end time of 4/10 and it's 485,000. So I think one of those dates is incorrect, the 4/10s.
This is Lynn. It's through page 327 in that section, that second section. Sorry.
Second section's 327? Okay.
Yeah, the second part is the prior report is pay ending 327. That's what happens with copy and paste. Sorry for the error.
I understand. I just wanted to understand the date so I had a good understanding of what the time period was for each.
Yeah, so the 485,000, to Lynn's point, is through March 27th, and then the box on the top through pay period ending April 10th is the correct amount.
Okay, thank you. Can we get that corrected for the record, please? Formally.
Okay, I think Lynn's gone. I mean, the correct amount, are we in agreement that the actual date needs to be adjusted to because of the cut and paste issue?
Yeah, it's a date issue. So the prior report on the first page of that county COVID-19 analysis, the bottom box dealing with the line salary, fringe benefits, overtime, hazard pay should say through pay period ending March 27th, 2020. The one on the top is correct. The amounts are correct as well. It's just the one date needs to be changed.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
So we will, yeah, we can correct that and reflect that. I mean, we'll correct it here and then receive that and file for the report. I think it satisfies Commissioner Spiz's question. Is there any additional discussion on any of the communications? Any other questions? Any other questions? Seeing none. Do we need to? Okay, if you're not talking, if you can go on mute, please. Do we need a roll call vote to receive communications? Pam?
No, it's a voice vote. But I believe, yeah, just a voice vote.
Okay, so all in favor of receiving the communications A, B, C, and D, which is at the back end of this packet, of your packets, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. And unanimously receive those communications. That brings us on to the consent agenda. Because of the length of other things on this, there are a couple items that maybe normally would have been a regular agenda, but are non-controversial and seem to be more routine business. Those are particularly items 6, 7, and 8. And then, of course, other tri-party things that we need to approve. Is there a motion to receive the? Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? Moved by Commissioner Spiz, second by Commissioner Quarles. Are there any items 1 through 8 that people want to pull off separately? Good, seeing none. Is there any discussion on any of the items on the consent agenda? Seeing none. Pam, please call the roll.
On the consent agenda, Commissioner Gershenson,
Yes.
Gingell,
Yes.
Zach,
Yes.
Quarles,
Yes.
Biz,
Yes.
Woodward,
Yes.
motion carried.
Okay, motion, a sufficient number voting in the affirmative. The consent agenda is adopted. Brings us onto our regular agenda, and we've got. I want to be very mindful of people's time. I know we got Commissioner Coulter here.
Commissioner?
I see Cheryl too. So the first item here, 1 second here. I just want to, Mr. Executive, are you on time constraints? Or
I'm not. I'm working from home today, so I'm good.
all right, okay. So we're going to knock through these as quickly as possible, and we'll get to the conversation about COVID response.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Our first item is Central Service Aviation Division Airport Land Lease. Is there a motion? Moved by Commissioner Spiz, seconded by Commissioner Gingell. We have Cheryl Bush on, who leads our airport. Cheryl, welcome. You want to speak to this item?
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, everyone. Yes, we have a new airport land lease. This is for an entity by the name of EJB-OC LLC. This is for the premises that were previously leased by Mr. Hanger, which was part of the corporate Eagle family. This allows them to sell the premises that they had previously occupied before they moved into their new facility at the end of last year. This new lease is for a 30-year term. We have agreed to terminate the Mr. Hanger lease, and so the two will occur simultaneously, the termination along with the new lease. There is no adjustment required to the budget. It is seamless from that perspective, and it's been approved by the airport committee as well as Corporation Council.
Great, thank you, Cheryl. Any questions that we have as it relates to this item? Commissioner Spiz.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you confirm there's a out clause within the contract? Because I know it's a 30-year lease contract, and I see that the rate is negotiable every 2 years, but I'm just wondering if either party wants to exit the lease, is there a clause within the current?
Not to exit. So what we seek is a simultaneous termination to enter into a new land lease. So to just terminate an early termination of a 30-year lease, it's not speaking to
nothing
that.
in the contract. Okay.
No.
Cheryl, this is consistent with our other lease agreements.
Yes, it's a standard.
The standard lease agreement across our entire airport hangar lease operations.
Yes, it is.
Any further discussion on this item? Seeing none, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Gingell,
Yes.
Zach,
Yes.
Quarles,
Yes.
Biz,
Yes.
Gershenson,
Yes.
Woodward,
Yes.
motion carried.
All right, sufficient
Thank
number
you.
of affirmative. The resolution is adopted. Thank you, Cheryl. Thank you for being with
Thank
us.
you.
Our
Yes,
virtual-
Thank you.
Okay. Moves us on item 10, Health and Human Services prescription for a healthy Pontiac grant acceptance. We need a motion. Moved by Commissioner Worrell, seconded by Commissioner Gershenson. And I believe we got Leanne Stafford or Kathy Forsley that's on.
Morning.
Oh, hey, there you are.
Hi.
Hi,
Yes,
would you like
so
me to speak this?
Okay, yes. So this grant is a subcontract with Oakland University. The original funding source is through Michigan Health Endowment and Fund Nutrition and Healthy Lifestyles Program. So this is actually a continuation of a pilot project in Pontiac that was funded through Blue Cross Blue Shield in 2018. And so basically what happens here is participants are referred through either healthcare providers or WIC or community partners or even themselves. We're really targeting parents with young children or seniors over 60 at risk for chronic disease and food insecurity. Basically what they do is they get a voucher for fresh fruits and vegetables, physical activity opportunities, and then they must attend or participate in a health education unit. And so some of the partners include Oakland University, obviously, St. Joe Mercy, Honor Community Health, Gary Bernstein Health Center, and Centro Multicultural de la Familia. Wow, I can't get that out this morning. The program covers Pontiac, also Auburn Hills and Waterford. So vouchers can be used at Oakland County Farmers Market, Carnival Market in Pontiac, Sprout Fresh Food Store, and the market at St. Joe's, and produce markets at All Saints Church. Budget is $22,058, and we are looking to hire 2 part-time health educators, program materials, and printing. The contract period was actually supposed to start February 1st, 2020 through July of 2021. Obviously, that has been delayed because of COVID-19. So once things start to slow down and we can pick this program back up, we will start to hire those employees and get the program started.
Thank you, Leanne. And just like one question, like the markets and the places, they're all in operation right now. I mean, they're obviously allowed to be in operation. Are they up and running right now, or most of them up and running right now?
Yeah, you know what? I'm not 100% sure on that. I can check on that and get back to you. And I think that's why they have kind of extended this program, knowing it's not going to start right away, but when those markets are open and we can hire the people and, you know, start getting physicians to write these prescriptions, we'll get it started.
Great, thank you. Any other questions for Leanne on this grant acceptance? Seeing none. Pam, please call the roll.
On item number 10, Commissioner Zach,
Yes.
Quarles,
Yes.
Biz,
Yes.
Gershenson,
Yes.
Gingell,
Yes.
Woodward,
Yes.
motion carried.
All right,
Thank
sufficient
you.
number of votes in the affirmative. The resolution is adopted. Thank you, Leanne. Goes on to item 11, Public Services Veteran Service Division Fiscal Year 2020 County Veteran Service Fund CVSF grant acceptance. We need a motion to accept the grant. Moved by Commissioner Spiz, second by Commissioner Quarles. Garth, are you on?
Yes, I am.
Okay, great. Do you want to speak to, I mean, this is, we authorized the grant to move forward, and then this is the grant acceptance. You want to give us kind of a summary and an update on where we're going from here?
Yes, absolutely. This was a grant that was originally in the fiscal year 20 budget that was line item vetoed by the governor and then reinstated by the legislature back, I believe, in January. So we're a little bit behind the ball as far as the time frame for this. So we submitted our application. Obviously, when we submitted that application, the world was a little bit of a different place, and we were going to utilize the funds for mostly for marketing. We had also some open house events, some
risk mitigation fund and a transportation program enhancement. That application was approved in the amount of $363,479 from the state of Michigan, and that's based on a base of $50,000 per county, and then the remainder of that grant is based on veterans population within the county. So the $50,000 and then the $313,000 additional dollars are based on our veterans population. So that grant application was approved by the state of Michigan, and we need to get that approved before we can do a project amendment. So we have to accept this approval, and then I've also created a budget amendment that I have provided to my chain of command and to Commissioner Woodward to review. And essentially what we're going to do because of the current crisis is we are going to transfer, reduce most of the programs and transfer $256,479 to provide for COVID-19 emergency assistance. That will be directed towards assistance for vehicle repairs, home repairs, child care expenses for individuals who are essential personnel, medical expenses, utilities, housing, and food and sundries. We'll create an application form and a board review and approve and deny those applications. And that is the direction that we feel going forward, given the current crisis, is the best way to try and utilize those funds.
Great. Thank you, Garth. And I believe that staff, Mr. Andrews, sent out something kind of giving a summary and explanation to give the heads up to all commissioners. Commissioner Zach, the floor is yours.
So Garth, are we seeing increased traffic as a result of COVID coming into your department right now?
We are not. We are working from home, but we're continuing to monitor phones, emails, things like that. So I think people are, unless it's a, urgent matter, are pretty much waiting and not, coming into the office or trying to contact us. So we're able to do our, I'm sorry.
I don't mean physically, but more call traffic, virtual business. Are we seeing an increased amount of business because of COVID?
We are seeing about the same level, but again, it's differently. We're doing it via phone call, email, whereas opposed, previously those people would probably come into the office and do a face-to-face interview with the counselor. We're doing that via phone call or, via email contact.
So I would like to suggest that we do some type of press release, some type of public communication, reaching out and letting our veteran residents know that these services and additional funding are there. I think this is an opportunity for us. We talked about using the previous grant money for outreach to veterans. I think this is another opportunity that we should be doing some specific outreach to them.
We did reserve a substantial portion of the grant that we're going to utilize exclusively for marketing, and that marketing is obviously going to be directed to veterans to let them know of this specific opportunity if they have an emergent need, a financial crisis, if they've been impacted by COVID-19. We want to be able to help them as much as possible. So we've reserved about $100,000 for marketing, and although that sounds like a lot of money, we want to get the word out. The worst thing would be, and my biggest fear is that we have this fund and that it's not utilized by our veterans. So we will obviously be using that. We had a marketing company that we used last year for this grant, and we're going to leverage that because they've already done most of the work as far as the advertising. And then we are also going to hopefully rely on our media and communications department, our county executive, our board of commissioners to get the word out, whether you have, newsletters, email, chains you can send stuff out to. We're definitely want to get the word out about this opportunity for them.
Okay, I would suggest that you work with our county exec department because they've been issuing lots of press releases on services and doing a great job of reaching the public. I think this is an important aspect of what we do. So thank you.
Commissioner Gingell.
Yeah, thanks. So Garth, I just want to make sure I understand. This is accepting a grant and or repurposing existing funds that are in the budget. This is not incremental dollars in any form or fashion.
I'm not sure what that, can you clarify that? What do you mean by incremental dollars or?
Well, what I'm saying is what you're doing here, just to make sure I'm clear, we're accepting a grant, right?
Correct.
And that grant. Yep, go ahead.
And that is the original grant application for $367,469. And then we are going to, the state of Michigan through the Michigan Veterans Affairs agencies allows a budget amendment. So I prepared a budget amendment that essentially moves the funds that were approved. For example, it moves, reduce cable advertising by $30,000, reduce radio advertising by $50,000, and transfers that into and increases the COVID-19 emergency assistance.
Mm-hmm. So all I'm doing is making sure that this isn't any overspend or incremental spend in the budget, which I don't believe it is. So I was just confirming. And then the second thing is, as we look at COVID-19 in total, I don't know if it would be Lynn or Sean or whoever, but I want to make sure we're capturing all these other activities outside the primary COVID sheet as well. So at the end of the day, we can look across everything we spent and have a total number.
Yeah, we will. I have been working with Mr. Carlson and the grant review process. I know Lynn Sankis has been made aware of this budget amendment, and it's going through that review right now. So,
right. Thank you. Anybody else? Question for Garth? And I think to Commissioner Gingell's point is that this was a total grant and of money coming in, not general fund county dollars. And we are just allocating some of those grant funds to support this effort. But I think to Commissioner Gingell's point about being able to track those expenditures to get that full picture makes a lot of sense. With seeing no further discussion, and everyone, I just want to confirm, everyone got the memo from Mike Andrews explaining in a copy from the from the governor's executive office talking about this. All for good. Okay, then let's, Pam, please call the roll on accepting this grant. Yes, go ahead.
Okay, on item number 11, Commissioner Quarles?
Yes.
Fizz?
Yes.
Gershenson?
Yes.
Gingell?
Yes.
Zach?
Yes.
Woodward?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Submission number voting in the affirmative. Garth, if you can stay on for just a second. Garth made reference to this, that we need to do a budget amendment to reallocate kind of the prescribed projects that this grant was going to fund. And so I'm going to authorize that, which is why I wanted to make certain that everyone had that information, that this would be the next step. So I think we should receive and file that communication that Mr. Andrews sent out. So I just want to make sure that everyone's aware that I will be authorizing the amendment to shift some of these funds in the grant to the COVID response to support our veterans. So can I get a motion to receive and file that communication? Moved by Commissioner Quarles, seconded by Commissioner Zach. Any discussion on that? Seeing none, all in favor of receiving and filing that communication, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. And unanimously received and filed. And the last thing I want to say, Garth, thank you for all that you're doing for your veterans. Also on behalf of the committee and on behalf of the board, I want to express our deepest condolences in the passing of your mother. In light of all of this, and our thoughts are with you, and we support you, and we're there for you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's been a surreal experience to lose somebody to this disease, and the closure is really difficult. So I appreciate your support, and she was a lovely, beautiful mother, and obviously will be missed. And I appreciate your kind words. Thank you.
Thank you, Garth. Thank you. And be well and be safe. All
Thank you.
right. That moves us to item 12, Water Resource Commissioner resolution to authorize advance long-term revolving fund to the Village of Lake Orion for replacement of supervisory control and data acquisition. Moved by Commissioner Gingell, seconded by Commissioner Spiz. Any discussion on this item? John, are you on? John Bash? Jim, do you want to? You got to unmute yourself. So bring the cursor down to the bottom of the screen, unmute yourself. There you go. Hey, John. Hey, Jim.
I had somebody. Brian, are you available here?
You hear me now? Yes. Yes, I'm here. I can go ahead and present this, Jim, if you want.
Go ahead.
Certainly. This is Dan Cooper, one of my engineers working on with this community.
Excellent. My name is Brian Coburn. I'm Chief Engineer Sewer Systems for WRC. We have been working with the Village of Lake Orion to address some of the concerns, some of the maintenance issues that have to be taken care of in the system. The big one is a lift station replacement project, which is not part of this motion, but that combined with the SCADA improvements, SCADA supervisory control and data acquisition, which monitors all the lift stations and provides alerts and alarms to our staff, that needs to be replaced. It's a 1990s vintage system. They're having difficulty financing this, and they've asked for our assistance in doing so, and that's where we're at today, is presenting a resolution for consideration for a loan for the village to pay back over 5 years to finance that improvement.
Great. Any questions for the Water Resource Commissioner office? Seeing none, pretty straightforward. All in favor? Madam Pam, will you please call the roll?
Okay, on item number 12, Commissioner Gershenson,
Yes.
Gingell,
Yes.
Zach,
Yes.
Quarles,
Yes.
Spiz,
Yes.
Woodward,
Yes.
motion carried.
Sufficient number voting in the affirmative, the resolution is adopted. Moves us to 13, the Water Resource Commissioner 2019 Annual Report Presentation. Our Water Resource Commissioner, Jim Nash, is here. And everyone has the report in your packet that I hope you had the opportunity to review. Need a motion to receive. So motion to pass this item, moved by Commissioner Zach, seconded by Commissioner Quarles. Commissioner Nash, you want to give us the high level of the status of our water infrastructure?
I will, and I'll have one of my managers, Steve Korth, kind of fill in what the actual report is in that. So this is required of Section 31 of the Michigan Drain Code of 1956, long as I've been around, and miscellaneous resolution 8603 from 1978. So we do this annually. This is just the report we do for all operations for the county. A lot of what we do, we work with every county, every community in the county from, the north to the south, east to west. So where we work with a lot on green infrastructure these days, we work with SEMCOG. We got a grant from them for the 14 communities of the GWK to study green infrastructure and how to make it for the communities to use more plentifully in their communities. So green infrastructure really is trying to absorb water before it reaches the gray infrastructure that's much more expensive. So this is what we do. And the benefits are significant over time, a lot of money saving and less flooding, hopefully. We've also finished up a project in Pontiac at the Clinton River Water Resource Recovery Facility. New technology, first in the state, third in the country, that will produce significantly more methane that we can use on site for all our energy uses, and it'll produce usable fertilizer for the public for free, or we can sell it, and it'll save millions of dollars a year in the operation of this facility. So all these kind of things are what we're doing, and finally, we've been working regionally with our local counties to do a regional stormwater ordinance, so everybody's on the same page on these things, and that's going to be really a big payoff for economically in the future. So all these things that we work on every day are part of this report, and I'm going to have Steve Korth kind of talk about what's actually in the report that you're going to be looking at. Steve?
I'm just going to provide a very high level of this report. It's broken into two parts. First part of the report is a high level summary of the projects our office worked on in 2019. There's 65 projects, a lot going on with our office. The balance of the report is just the fiscal status of each of our drain budgets and lake level budgets for reference as a snapshot in time. So if there's any questions on any of the projects listed, feel free to contact me or Jim. We can get you answers. But that's basically what we're looking at with this annual report.
Great. Thank you.
I want to mention too that, you know, we work with every single office in this county really in some way or other. So whether it's the, you know, our protecting public health or all the things around economic development, the sheriff's office, I mean, we work with everybody here, and this is an amazing county to work with. I have terrific staff, and I know working with everybody in this county has always been good. So we get along well, and we'll continue to do that.
Thank you. Thank you, Water Resource Commissioner Nash. I love your COVID beard. Any discussion for the on this? I am accepting this report from commissioners. Seeing none, Pam, why don't you take the roll?
That's a voice vote. It's just receive and file.
Okay, then we'll take a voice vote. All in favor of receiving the annual report, say aye. Oh, wait.
Aye.
Commissioner, you got a question? Oh, okay. All in favor of receiving the report, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say nay. The report is received unanimously. All right, so I am going to move this post stay home, stay safe planning. We do have to make time for for Executive Coulter. I want to make sure he can address us, answer our questions, and then get on to the running of the business to make sure everything's moving forward. So I'm going to move item 17 up right now, if there's no objection. One thing just to kind of set up the conversation that we've talked in this as a board, and action that we've taken is to, one, plan for our operations to open up county government and get things up and running, and what that process looks like. And we've also talked about the importance of looking beyond when the stay-at-home order is lifted. And so this is an opportunity to have that conversation with this committee and begin for the board to be active participants in that, and hear from our executive and the work that's being done by the executive team. So Executive Coulter, I open it up to you and to give you the floor.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you fine.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, I appreciate you letting me get on the agenda here. I know you're used to talking to Sean and Lynn, who are on this call, Hillary as well. But as we begin this budget process, I wanted to be here to give you sort of a context, I think, for where I feel like we are. And they'll be able to certainly talk in more specifics. But this is an unprecedented time that we find ourselves in. And I wanted to give some context to where we're headed. You know, we all know, the folks on this call know, that the hallmark of our fiscal practices has been our 3-year balanced budget that we adopt annually with a bipartisan support. Many of you I served with as a commissioner and on the finance committee, and you know, you've heard me say I've learned the value of these practices. I took them with me to Ferndale, and when I returned to the county last year, a unanimous vote on this 3-year budget was my top priority. So I know you all know that. In late February, when we went to the rating agency meetings, we reemphasized the bipartisan commitment to fiscal discipline, and we conveyed to the rating agencies, you know, our plans to maintain and improve our budgeting forecasts and to make critical investments in our future. And I think all of us are rightly proud of the fact that the county retained its AAA bond rating in March. And I appreciate in particular Commissioner Woodward and Commissioner Spiz, who were there with us in Chicago when we had those conversations. Who could have understood that shortly after that visit to Chicago, our county was, you know, hit so hard by the COVID-19 pandemic. And so we have quickly been, as you all know, marshaled our resources to combat the virus and support our residents. And this has been an ongoing daily effort, and I deeply appreciate the support of the board. But we have to be in this together. So It's almost impossible to fathom that in 6 weeks, we lost over 500 residents, 6,000 of whom have additional ones who have tested positive for COVID-19. Many of them hospitalized, and thank God, some of them have now begun to recover. We've also had nearly 100,000 residents file for unemployment insurance claims in the last 6 weeks. I mean, these are just staggering numbers. So, nothing is more fundamental than our health and our economic well-being. And this pandemic challenges and requires us to be laser focused on beating the virus and addressing the economic impact of it and helping our county recover. So I wanted to join you this morning because today really begins the traditional budget process for the county. We're presenting to you the preliminary revenue estimates, and then we're beginning in earnest to finalize the budget, the 3-year budget for fiscal years 21 through 23 that we're going to present to you in July. So I wanted to just take this opportunity to talk to you about our approach to 3 budget areas. Number one, COVID spending, as Commissioner Gingell referred to earlier, where we've got our eye on those things that are COVID related. We also have to keep our eye on the remainder of the fiscal year 2020 budget that we're halfway through now, and then the preparations for fiscal years 21 through 23. So I want to break it down that way. So let's talk a little bit about COVID spending. I think we can be proud of the historic economic strength of Oakland County's residents, communities, businesses, and the fiscal health of our budget, which really did allow us to act quickly and to fully support our pandemic response. And that's what we've done. Our Emergency Operations Center, obviously in partnership with our health department, the executive office, we've prioritized this spending. Fully 91% of our pandemic response appropriations to date has been targeted at personal protection equipment. There's been a huge gap there. There continues to be so. It was critical that the board authorized the $16.5 million towards the pandemic response so that we're able to secure those materials, which are primarily still PPE, and going forward, testing is going to be an increasingly important part of that that's needed in our county. Our team is going to continue to provide weekly updates to the board and obviously answer any questions you have about that spending, and we can get into more of that with my team. As you know, in partnership with this board, we moved quickly to establish the Small Business Stabilization Fund. The local review committees in the 12 districts got to work, and those grants are going to be going out the door this week. This is a critical infusion of $3 million to our small businesses. And we found just how critical it is as we see the delay in some of the federal funds that have not yet reached our businesses. So, and again, as you know, I'm really excited that $700,000 of that was set aside to encourage small businesses to transition to making PPE. And we announced the first 2 of those grants earlier this week. During the stay-at-home order, we've taken steps to support our 24/7 hourly workers that are required to be on the job with hazard pay, and to recognize the hard work of our merit employees who've been required to be on site. I want to be clear about the hazard pay, folks. I believe that this pay, which has been the practice of the county in the past, I believe it was the right thing to do for our frontline employees who did not have the option to stay home. And in fact, since our decision to do that, other counties in the region and the state, frankly, have adopted this same practice. We've also taken steps to equip employees to work from home. Now, in some instances, we've kept employees on rotating teams, and in the case of a few dozen employees, we have kept them stabilized on the payroll, even though, frankly, they couldn't do their work from home anymore. So as we begin to plan for a phased reopening of county operations, we know our county operations are going to look different, and we're going to have to work differently. So we're going to have to prioritize critical service to our residents and the safety of our workforce. Both of those things are going to be critical going forward. What are the critical services we have to provide, and how are we going to keep our employees safe? Each department right now is working with April Lynch, my deputy executive, who's also acting as our acting HR director, to create short and medium-term staffing plans. We're also working with facilities on updating our work and public space plans, and with the health department on the important screening and prevention measures that we're going to have to put in place for our employees and the public who interact at county buildings. So I'll look forward to presenting those plans to you when they're fully complete, but just know they're coming. So as far as the next bucket, the fiscal year 2020, the year that we're in now. So our goal is to ensure that by the end of this fiscal year, the expenditures that we've made from the fund balance be made whole. We think this is going to be accomplished in a number of ways. First, we think that there's FEMA and CARES Act reimbursement. We have requests there, but we know that that's not 100%, and we're going to have to do additional constraints. We've set a target of saving from the current budget that we're in an additional $4 to $6 million in this year's budget to make the fund balance whole. If we're going to hit that goal, it's probably going to look like $4 to $6 million. Now, it's important to note that preliminary meetings with all of our departments indicates that, with just a few exceptions, departments are either flat or favorable in their fiscal year 20 forecasts after quarter one. Now, we're having ongoing quarter two conversations, and we're going to have details and data on quarter two in the next coming weeks, and we'll obviously be sharing that with you. So I'm confident at this point, as confident as I can be in anything, that we can create the savings to cover any expenditures that are not reimbursable by the federal government, and keep our eye on any additional unintended fiscal consequences that we can't predict today. So I want to tell you a few things that we're doing. I've directed management and budget through, obviously, Sean Carlson, the deputy director there, to implement the following measures for the remainder of this fiscal year. So we're going to implement the hiring freeze that the board approved earlier. I've asked them to cut an additional $3 million in discretionary capital improvement projects. We're banning out-of-state travel, and we're going to renegotiate service contracts that we currently have. Also, as we begin to plan for a phased return of our county workforce, we're going to have to make additional adjustments there, and those include a couple of things. Number one, we're going to reduce the hazard pay from 1.5% of pay to 1.35%. And we're also going to need to equate available work to employment, which may include, and I want you to just be prepared for this, but it may include temporary furloughs for those employees who we just don't have work for them to come back to right now. And we'll have more to say about that as soon as I get these finalized department plans back from April this week. So more to come on that, but I want it to be on your radar. And then finally, the third bucket, which is our 3-year budget that we're currently working on to present to you in July. And obviously, Lynn Sonkis is here to review with you the 3-year preliminary revenue estimate. But that revenue estimate reduction for next year, and she's going to go into this with more detail for you, is about $4 million. And that's a manageable number. But I want you to also know, and she'll tell you about where that number comes from. And if that turned out to be the case, that's a manageable number, and we'll talk about how we can manage it. But I want you to also know that the budget challenges of the state, there's budget challenges at the state, there's other potential obstacles, and we're keeping our eye on anything that could change this preliminary estimate. I want to talk to you today about one budget practice that we are going to begin to implement tomorrow in our budget orientation sessions with our departments. We talked about this at our rating agency meetings, Frankly, I think they were pleased to hear it and that we were taking these steps. But I want to be really clear with you all about what we're doing. So historically, the county has projected to use fund balance to balance the budget. You may have heard this referred to as a structural budget deficit that we have in Oakland County. Now, fortunately, in most years, the actual revenues and expenditures did not require us to use this planned use of fund balance. I believe we should phase out this practice. I want our projections to more closely align with our actual spending. And I want each department to create a budget that lives within its means. I believe our expenses need to more closely equal our revenues. This new approach will call for more collaboration with our departments regarding their personnel, their operating expenses, their internal service funds, and the like. So as we collaborate with them on their budgets, we're also requesting that each department establish performance metrics. These key performance indicators, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with in the private sector, are going to help us be a guide in making appropriate decisions regarding the services that we're delivering to our county and ensuring that we're providing a good return on our investment to our taxpayers, frankly. So we will no longer project the use of fund balance to balance our operational budget. Now, when it comes to utilizing the fund balance, I believe, and we can have this is really a policy debate and a fiscal conversation, but I believe we should be guided by 3 principles. We should be driving operational efficiencies with one-time spending, for example, in information technology or workforce improvements, as we've been doing. So one-time operational efficiencies. Advance the protection of the safety of our health of our workforce and our residents. Obviously, we've seen what that looks like recently. And then promote the stabilization, recovery, and growth of Oakland County's economy. I don't believe it should be for operational expenses, and I think most of you would agree with me on that. Let me just, in respect of your time, I just want to, in conclusion, let me just say, our lives may very well be altered by COVID-19. And there will be years, decades maybe, to discuss the lessons learned. But I do believe that it will serve as the prime example of the optimal use of our county's fund balance. It is raining. If this is a rainy day fund, I think it was appropriate a use of that fund balance so far. But I also believe it's appropriate that we replenish that fund. Our county is strong. Our budget is strong. And that strength gives us the opportunity to beat COVID-19 and help our businesses and our residents. We're as the engine of economic growth in this state. It's really important for us and our state that we get back on our feet quickly. So later this week, I'm going to announce the full membership of the COVID-19 Economic Recovery Task Force. This has been a high priority for us. I'm pleased that 2 of the people in this meeting, Commissioners Woodward and Gingell, will be on that task force. The mission of this, I think, distinguished group, I'm really pleased by who's all agreed to do this, is going to be to make recommendations not only to me, but to this board on actions that we can continue to take to support our small businesses and our community organizations to ensure that they stabilize, recover, and thrive as our economy opens. So I appreciate you giving me that much time, but I wanted you to hear all of this from me first. I'm going to begin to say this more publicly, but I wanted you to hear it from me first. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I am finished.
Right. Thank you, Commissioner Coulter. I think the Commissioner had a couple questions if you have a couple more minutes here.
Of course.
Commissioner Quarles.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me begin by congratulating you and thanking you, County Executive. It seems that you and your staff have taken the time to do a well thought out plan to ensure that the businesses and the citizens of Oakland County recover and come to whatever the new norm is going to be as quickly and safely as possible. One question that I do have is about the hazardous pay. do we know about how many employees that's going to affect?
Sean, yeah. There may be someone on this call that knows the number more specifically than I do. It primarily affects the sheriff's office, although there are some other folks included in that. Sean or Lynn, do you have that number?
Just as an aside, in our last board meeting, April mentioned the number of roughly 1,200 employees that would be impacted by the hardship pay.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And when you are saying furloughs, is that in your mind or in Deputy Executive Carson's? Would that number affect a great deal of our employees, or are we looking at a different department?
Right. It's not anywhere near the number we just talked about for hazard pay. No, it's a relatively small amount of employees, but you know, everyone it affects, it could potentially be, you know, a very changing thing. But I want to be clear, the furloughs will be necessary not because of some huge budget deficit that we find ourselves in, but because literally the work that they did has gone away. We're not going to be able to reopen immediately in the same way that we were performing work. A lot of the work is going to be done online. So some of these are going to be administrative people, receptionists and the like. If a department isn't open, somebody there at the reception desk literally has nothing to do. And so we've been carrying these folks, but you know, in all frankness, our financial ability to do that is limited. And so we're, you know, I don't have a number for you today, and I don't have an exact plan, but we'll have it shortly. I just need the information from April Lynch's work plans, department work plans, to know exactly how many people that affects. So I don't have an exact number for you today, but we will probably by the end of the week.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Corral. Is there any question for commissioners for the executive? I know there's some other people who are going to pipe in, and this intersects really with two items that we're on the agenda.
Yeah.
So, Commissioner Zach and Commissioner Spiz. Commissioner Zach.
Well, as chair of finance, which I think is going to spin off at some point, I really appreciate the planning and the vision, and you know that you are watching the budget for this year, looking ahead. Love the fact that your goal is to be whole after this crisis for this budget year, and also looking forward as we start budget discussion. So I applaud you and your team.
Thank you. Thanks.
Commissioner Spiz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Coulter, for coming in and talking with us today and informing us on your plans going forward. And Mr. Woodward, you made a comment about kind of merging two of the items together, number 14 and number 17. I'd like to hear a little bit more about number 17. What's the plan? I know you have this group you're putting together, and you're going to announce a little bit more next week, but is there anything else you can share with us on what's the strategy, or what's your vision for getting Oakland County back to work? You know, I understand we've talked about getting the employees within Oakland County complex back to work, or complexes back to work.
Yeah.
But I'd like to see all the business, everything outside of that, you know, because there's a lot of people that are, as everybody here is aware, everybody's antsy. You know, there's a lot of frustration on some parts out there. So what are we doing from Oakland County to help mitigate those frustrations to a degree, and getting some of these businesses at least starting to ramp up their engines a little bit? Is there anything that you and your administration have talked about or are thinking of?
Yeah, and that's what I meant by this economic recovery task force, by the way. That's what, you know, and we've done a lot of this, we've done a lot of thinking around this internally within the economic development department. Those folks have been putting a lot of plans and ideas in place, but this is the time where we wanted to make sure we heard from business owners, nonprofit people in the nonprofit sector, people in the education space, frankly. What is it really going to take? What are the very real obstacles to, and this team, which we're going to announce the full membership of later this week, is looking at three phases. What we call stabilization, which is sort of right now. What do they need right now to stabilize, to survive until the reopening happens? And then the second phase is, okay, the governor lifts the stay-at-home orders in some sort of phased fashion, I'm guessing. What does that look like? What's the assistance that they're going to need? What are the very real implications of that for our business, nonprofit, and education communities? And then third, looking even further down the road, how does Oakland County thrive? Okay, we've survived, we got through it, and how do we really thrive going forward? It's sort of a three-phased approach. And that committee, we announced the co-chairs. So it's Alan Kiriluk. I don't know if you've heard this. Alan Kiriluk from Redico, obviously. The president of St. Joseph Mercy, Pontiac is on that. But also Pete Provenzano from Oakland Community College, which there'll be a huge workforce development component to this. And then the fourth person is Barbara. Hillary, help me out.
Whitaker.
Barbara Whitaker, who has a huge, has a great business background from GM. She's also a consultant now. But anyway, I don't want to belabor that. But Mike, I want you to know that this is going to be a critical piece of how we do exactly what you say. And we're not going to wait and meet for weeks and weeks and then put out some big report. We're going to be very transparent through this group. And we're going to be making recommendations as we go along in all three of these phases. And as this group and we all come to consensus, they're going to make recommendations to you, the board, and us, the executive office. And we're going to begin to implement things along the way. So we're not going to just sit back and wait for a final report someday. So you will continue to hear advice and recommendations from this group on what they think are the best things, and we all agree are the best things we can do. I mean, I don't know if that addresses your question, but
it does to a degree, and I'm glad to hear you say it's going to be timely because before we know it, it's going to be May 1st, right?
Oh yeah.
And I agree with you. It's going to be a phased-in approach on some level, some different types. But
yeah,
one of my major concerns is the timeliness of everything.
Yeah.
Because depends on what happens on May 1st. People out there in our county are eager to get back to work, eager to do stuff. And they're all going to be chomping at the bit to do something. And I'd rather have something out there sooner than later.
Yes.
Right? Sooner we can get information out to the public, the sooner we can get a good plan out to everybody, the better.
And we met yesterday.
We're gonna have more frustration, more issues, more people going up to protesting and all that stuff. And that's what I'm concerned with. I mean, I'd rather get information out to the people.
And so just on that point, I'll reiterate again, we met yesterday with the co-chairs. We're going to announce the full committee later this week, but that was something that they all felt strongly about and agreed with, which is we're going to be releasing our recommendations as quickly as we have them. So even in this first phase, which we're calling stabilization, some people think there might be a better name for that. I don't know. But this phase that we're in, the immediate phase of, okay, the governor eases some restrictions. What does that mean? What are our recommendations? Let's get them out there as we move forward. So not holding back and waiting, but advising the commission and the executive's office as we move through this as quickly as possible is going to be, and Mike Gingel's on this task force. So if you don't think he's making recommendations quickly enough, you can nudge him. But I think you'll see that we all very much agree with your concern that there's no time to waste.
All right, we are going to have time for more stay home, stay safe planning at the end of the meeting. I just want to make sure we can move on. But I got one more comment from Commissioner Gingell. Question, and then we'll move on to the rest of the agenda.
So I know. So first of all, thanks, Dave, for coming today. Appreciate it. And you got a lot on your plate, so we certainly understand that. I'm not going to reiterate things, but as I've been saying throughout this, urgency, patience, and wisdom. We just need to apply that on all the things that we're doing around COVID-19. And the other thing is, we have Senate Majority Shirkey putting out ideas around how to reopen the state. You have President Trump and the administration putting out ideas on how to reopen the country. I'm not saying any of those are good, bad, or indifferent. What I'm saying is people are starting to get a lot of messages that are going to get mixed. And so us getting a tight plan and guidelines around what it means to Oakland County is what I'm most interested in. And I don't think, philosophically, it's the county putting out pots of money to get businesses back in business. Businesses are capitalists and entrepreneurs. I mean, they want to do it on their own. But the issue that's on my mind is right now, these companies have had to furlough people or take them off the payroll as part of the SBA, the PPE plan, and they're going to be rehiring.
I didn't catch that.
And if reworkers don't come back to work, they're going to get identified and taken off the unemployment payrolls. So these numbers that are out there right now in my mind are probably inflated because of the process that are happening. The real impact's going to come in the next few weeks and months as these companies get back up to business, may need less employees, may be bringing people back that don't want to come back, and they get cut off the unemployment that they're getting state and federal governments. So it's a complex issue. I'm looking forward to working with you on the task force. But, you know, if the governor lifts the restrictions in May, there's not a whole lot of time for us to be getting plans in place, which is why I introduced the resolution at the last meeting to get moving on it. So you won't be waiting on me to push action. I can assure you that.
Right.
No, I appreciate that. And can I just quickly address 2 points? Number one, because I know there was a lot of talk about what's the plan. I want to reemphasize our economic development folks have been thinking through this. Our public facing has very much been public health for good reason, but it's not like they've just been sitting back, waiting for this to be over. And so we really feel like this task force is now the final piece of helping to validate some of the things that we've been thinking, and people smarter than me about economic development, believe me, but validate it, make sure we're not missing anything, inform that. That's number one. And number two, I just want to be clear about this, just so everyone understands. This task force, and I don't believe I do or we do as a board or I do as an executive, we don't have the authority to reopen Oakland County's economy. So we do have to wait for whether it's the governor, the president working with the governor, however that happens. Our charge on this task force is when it happens, we have to be prepared to help make sure economic development happens in Oakland County. So we don't have that authority, but I look forward to working with you and the whole committee. So thank you. Thanks for letting me be here.
Thank you, Executive Colt.
I can wait, Dave. I can wait. Yes.
Okay, yeah. All right, we're gonna. There's more discussion. I just want to let Executive Coulter get back to work and that he's doing. I want to thank you for taking the time this morning to be with this committee to give this update, to give us an insight on things that are coming, and we look forward to continue working with you. So, can you believe I can believe right now? For those who are watching at home, we're getting a little bit better every time we do these online things. I know sometimes it's hard to follow the video conference and the agenda. We just heard from the county executive give a high overview of things that we're doing as it relates to our budget situation. It's one of our prime responsibilities as a county and a county board, and kind of address some of the post-home stay safe planning that's underway. On the agenda, we're coming to the fiscal services, the preliminary revenue estimates. This is the process. This is the beginning process of our annual budget planning, and obviously COVID-19 has injected a new challenge in all of this. And so we are item 14 on the agenda for anyone watching at home, including some of our fellow board members. I'm going to tee up Sean Carlson, Deputy Executive Sean Carlson, to start talking through there. I also realize that I think there's probably other people on your team, and Sean, I'll let you introduce those folks who might chime in. But we kind of come back to the beginning process of our budget review as we look backwards and then look forward for future 3-year budgeting. That's where we are on the agenda, and I'll open the floor to you, Mr. Carlson.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am going to turn it over to Lynn Sonkis here in a second. I just want to say that we will be having budget orientation sessions tomorrow with the county executives, departments on Thursday, and then all of the other electeds on Friday. So we'll be rolling out the budget. We will be discussing exactly the things that you just heard from our county executive on in regards to COVID-19, the impact that that's having on this year's budget and how we're responding to that. And then we will go into FY 21 through 23 in regards to starting that process. So one of the things that officially kicks off this budget planning and preparation process is the preliminary revenue estimates. Lynn Sonkis has provided that to you. I believe Lynn is on the phone. I've also asked Dave Hebert to join in case there's any questions related to property taxes, given that 55 or 50% plus of our revenue structure is around property taxes. So with that, I'll turn it over to Lynn. Lynn, are you on? I believe she is.
Lynn, if you're on mute. I see Lynn. We might need.
Lynn Sonkis, you're on. If you can unmute. What is it? *6 if she's on the phone. Is that right, Dave?
I think so. Let me see what I can do here. Let me see if I can unmute. She's got a weird symbol on her thing here. I wonder, Lynn, you might need to like log off and log back on. I'm seeing a inability for you to speak. And why don't we just give a.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now, Lynn.
Okay, I could hear you, but for some reason you couldn't hear me. I was on. I thought I had to redial in.
Yeah,
I
no
apologize.
worries. Lynn, the floor is yours.
Okay, so you have on starting on PDF page 527 of your packet. There's 3 pages that highlight the revenue summary, the preliminary revenue estimates for 21, 22, and 2023. There are a couple of areas that are being changed. The primary area, as mentioned earlier, is our property tax revenue. Now that we have the equalization report from completed by Dave Heber and his team, they have reviewed that information, and there has been a meeting internally within the county to determine what are the assumptions that are going to be utilized for 21, 22, and 23 in comparison to the amended plan that we had in place with last year. So the impact to property tax revenue, it's about a $3.3 million impact to 21, a $2.5 million impact to 2022, and another $3.4 million to 2023. So it's about $9.2 million overall for those 3 fiscal years. And the assumptions that were changed, obviously by reviewing everything that's going on with COVID-19 as another factor in there, our assumptions in previous years, the county's assumptions in previous years, were a 4.25% increase of taxable value on real property. And that was for 21, 22, and it was a 4% increase for 2023. Those assumptions have been revised based on the latest information that's available to reduce the taxable value increase assumption for 2021 to 1.8%. So it went down from 4.25 to 1.8%, going down from 4.25 for 2022 to 3.5 taxable value change for real property. In 2023, the assumption previously was a 4% increase, and that the assumption is that there will start to be some increase happening in 2023 to bring that up to 4.25%. So again, that's the largest change that we have overall on the revenue estimate. There are a couple of areas that we are watching in the other intergovernmental revenue section of the estimate here, about halfway through the page on PDF page 527. You'll see the line item called other intergovernmental revenues, non-departmental. So within that non-departmental, it includes revenue sharing from the state as well as convention facility tax revenue. So there is some concern that we're going to be watching the revenue sharing payments from the state. This is the statutory piece that's distributed to the counties. There's not been any indication that there will be any impact to 2020. In fact, there was a webinar put on by the state treasurer's office on Monday, this past Monday, and they indicated that those 2020 revenue sharing payments are continuing to go out as planned, as well as the convention facility tax. However, they do make a point on revenue sharing that is statutory revenue sharing that is approved by appropriation by the state. So until we get those updated numbers or the state's budget impact, we'll be watching that and making adjustments as needed during the budget process. Now, we do utilize that revenue sharing for some discretionary programs and project expenditures. And again, if changes are needed, we'll be looking at those discretionary programs. The other change that we made for downward trend was investment income. That's on the second page, I believe, of your packet, or second PDF page 528. Because of the adjustments or the interest rates falling, we've made some minor adjustments there. We did have, if you look at the line item and investment income non-departmental, you'll see that we did realize some windfall in 2019 because of market value adjustments at that time. But interest rates have since fallen, and part of that market value adjustment, as explained in our year-end report for 2019, dealt with the one retiree healthcare bond that we hold in our investment portfolio that has a par value of $34 million and actually had a market value at the end of the year of $39.5 million. So that's what really drove that up. But again, we're going to be watching that closely. As far as charges for services within the department, we have experienced in the past favorability for various areas, including the clerk's office, the treasurer's office, courts, as far as collections. We're forecasting and preliminary revenue estimates to keep those even with the planned assumptions previously. So we're not expecting that favorability to continue. We're expecting that we're probably going to see some reductions in some charges for services as it impacts maybe possibly land sale, land transfer tax revenue, etc. So we'll continue to monitor that. And if there's any questions, again, we'll be continuing to monitor this throughout the budget process, as we always do, to make adjustments when and where needed.
Great. Thank you, Lynn. I might take a pause here. Sean, if this is okay, to see if there's any commissioners that have questions for Lynn on the stuff that she's reported on. Do I see any commissioners have any questions? Okay. All right, Sean, do I turn it back to you? Or are we good on this part for the agenda? You're on mute.
Yeah, we're all set. We just wanted to make sure that we were informing you of the budget orientation and providing you the preliminary revenue estimate. So thank you for your time today.
Great. Well, I think this in kicking off. I mean, obviously, it's an ongoing practice. It's been a practice of Oakland County for a long time to constantly monitor our adopted budget and always looking to the future. This starts paving a picture of the parameters in which future budget planning needs to be. And appreciate you being here with us. So can I get a motion to receive and file? Moved by Commissioner Zach, seconded by Commissioner Gershenson. To receive and file the report by Ms. Sonskis and Mr. Carlson that we presented on. Any further discussion on that? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye. I need at least one of your voices.
Aye.
I saw you. Aye. All right. Yes, aye. Okay. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. And it's received unanimously. What I will also mention, and I've talked to the chair of finance, I still got to work through working with staff. I just, given the economic realities that we are, this information, the conversations the administration is having with departments, as we prepare for the budget process long before July 1, when a budget is formally prepared to us, to get the finance committee up and running. We're working, I'm gonna be working with Mr. Ward on how we accomplish that. We might activate whether it's all the committees or some of the committees, but probably will require some sort of board action to do that. But I've asked Commissioner Zach to be prepared to start convening that group as early as next week. And so there's more on that coming, but this is kind of like tease off that conversation. We've got not just the budget realities and the budget planning for the next fiscal year, but a series of outstanding issues that haven't been resolved since the last budget that is going to require a lot of time and attention. We want to make sure those conversations are happening as soon as possible. So I just, for information to the full committee, and I will reiterate that at the board as well. Commissioner Spiz.
David, is it your intent to put something in front of the Board of Commissioners relative to re-engaging the Finance Committee? How do you plan on doing that?
Well, I think I'll be working with Mr. Ward. I think it's the rules that we adopted. Part of our board rules is that under an emergency, we can create this emergency operations center. It doesn't make a provision necessarily to have one of those, one of the original standing committees to start. It seems to read all 5 go back up, or we keep this. And so either possibly bring forth a question to have the finance start up, and then we'll continue this and then phase in the other ones, or push all the committees going forward. Pushing all the committees going forward, I mean, we're going to have to make sure that we've got the staff capacity to be able to do that and support all the committees. And so I'll be working with Mr. Ward to a position where we are, or some other reconfiguration, maybe it's 3 committees, and then disbanding this and allowing the work to happen through our normal committee process. Starting in May.
Okay. Just the reason I ask is same comment as I made with Executive Coulter is May 1st is coming very quickly, right?
Oh, I know.
And
Yeah,
believe,
there will be some action coming up at our next board meeting. I mean, at minimum, make sure that finance gets up and running. I think I want to talk to all the committee chairs and make sure our staff capacity to be able to support it. So it's either going to be the way I look at it, the Emergency Operations Center Committee and Finance, all as one option. 2, all 5 standing committees, and we disband the EOO committee, or maybe 3 of the standing committees keep going forward for the time being, and I mean to make sure that we can address the standing capacity. But we will have a plan very short. I expect something I can start circulating to commissioners to think about, so that we can decide at our next board meeting.
Okay, because this also ties in with getting everybody back into the office, et cetera, right? That April's working on, that's all tied together. So
exactly, we have limited. There's no ours. I mean, our staff is still working remotely. We have I know at least one staff person that shows up in building to be able to make sure that we can stream our meetings. And so yes, it's all those considerations, making sure they fit in tandem with the opening up county business operations. So that's why I thought I'd hoped for this meeting to be able to be very clear. This is what I'm recommending that we go forward, but we're going to need another day or so. But by the end of this week, plan to see something circulating with a plan that on the board that we will make a decision one way or another what we're doing going forward.
Okay, that's good. And also keep in mind to consider a plan for the Board of Commissioners meeting again in the auditorium. Can we do half and half? Can we do 100? That needs to be taken into account also.
It's probably not happening.
Just throwing it out there now because people will ask.
Yep. No. If they ask, I mean, I planned it. We'll be doing this at least through May, and then as things can evolve, and when we can safely do that. Once we start doing that, we also have to be making provisions for the public to be able to participate in those types of things. And so, as long as those state orders for remote meetings stay in place, we will be meeting remotely.
But we should
Um,
plan. We need to have a plan in place. That's my whole point, because they could be lifted anytime.
I will. Moving, any other questions on that point? Okay, let's move on to item 15. For those who are watching at home, item 15 is the fiscal year 2019 independent audit presentation. And I see we've got Stacy Reeves with us.
Good morning.
And there we go, Tim St. Andrews is with us as well. And so,
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for being with us this morning. Can I get a motion? Motion by Commissioner Zach, seconded by Commissioner Gingell. Dealing with our independent audit. This is one of the chief responsibilities of this board, and so we've got our auditors on here, and so I will open it up to Stacy, Tim, however you want to kind of speak to this, and then we'll take action afterwards.
Thank you so much, and we will be brief. We understand that you have a lot on the agenda today. We appreciate the opportunity to spend a few minutes with you just to cover the audit results. I am Stacy Reeves. I'm the engagement partner for the county's audit. With me today is Tim St. Andrew, who's a principal in our firm and the senior manager on the engagement. We did complete the September 2019 audit. As a reminder, the audited financial statements include all operations of the county. The audit went extremely well, and it takes a significant amount of effort from the county team to deal with the auditors for the amount of time that we are there working with them. So we really do appreciate the responsiveness and preparation of the entire county team throughout this process. It was stellar again this year. I know you've received the county CAFR. In lieu of going through it in detail, we do have a very short presentation that Tim will walk through. Before we start the presentation, I just want to comment on the fact that the county did receive an unmodified or clean opinion again this year as part of the audit process. That's the highest level of opinion that we can offer, that the county's financial statements are free of material misstatement. So Tim is going to start through the presentation. If you have any questions as we're going through that, please don't hesitate to ask.
Okay, thank you, Stacy. So as mentioned, this is a brief presentation, really meant to be high level and to touch on some of the highlights within the 2019 financial statements of the county. And we do understand that the information presented within these slides is 7 months old, and a heck of a lot has happened since then. And so I will keep it brief. And
Tim,
the presentation. Go ahead.
Do you have the ability to put the slide presentation up on the screen, or do you need me to do that on our end?
We have already
It is on PDF. It looks like on page 515 in the packet, if that helps.
Yeah.
Chairman,
We
otherwise
we made you a presenter as well, so if you want to share that on screen, you can.
If you want to and talk it through it. I'm just thinking also for those, we've got commissioners who are watching this at home to be informed, as well as the public. So if you're are you able to show that, or I can have staff do it on our end?
Yep. Let me see if let me know if you can see it.
Yep. You want to?
Is it up there?
Yep.
It is. If you want to
Okay,
make that
great.
full screen, you.
Do a full show screen if you want.
Just do a presentation mode. Also down in the right-hand corner of your PowerPoint.
Let's see. How's that?
Very good. Perfect. Perfect. Thank you, Tim.
Okay, you're welcome. All right, so the first slide we have here is the general fund revenue for 2019. And as you can see here, total revenue for the general fund was just north of $436 million. And it is by revenue source. And this is an increase of 3.4% from prior year. And if you're to compare 2019 with 2018, the revenue by source is fairly consistent. And so again, I'm going to go through these pretty quickly. If there are questions along the way, feel free to stop me. Because property taxes, as was mentioned earlier on this call, make up about 55% of the general fund revenue, we thought it would be helpful to cover just one measure that really impacts tax revenue, and that would be property values. So here we have the trend dating back to 1998 for the state equalized value and the taxable value. And as you can see here, the trend in 2019 continued to be positive, with state equalized value growing about 6.5% and taxable value growing at 5.2%. And it's difficult to tell from the slide, but if you were to look at the data, the inputs, the 2019 numbers are actually still slightly behind the high from back in 2007. And so we're about a year or two away from hitting those numbers, which really signals the importance of building that gap between state equalized value and taxable value, because the bigger gap that you have, the bigger cushion that you have, really protects you and can help in the event we have another housing market recession, will help with the reduction of those tax revenues. Next slide we have here is the general fund expenditures, and the total expenditures for the year, and this is again by function, were $421 million. This is actually a decrease of $20 million from 2018. And that, for the most part, was due to the transfers to other funds. And there was $20 million less transferred from the general fund to capital projects funds in 2019. So if we were to remove the transfers and compare 19 to 18, the expenditures would actually be pretty flat year over year. And then when we put those together, we have our fund balance, and in 2019, there was an increase of $14.7 million to the general fund balance. Both revenues and expenditures were favorable when compared to budget, and I won't go through the details there, but the year-end report that was distributed in December does a really nice job of explaining the increase and the variances. So if you did want to revisit that, I would encourage you to take a look at that year-end report. And then another look at the fund balance for 2019, and this is the breakdown by fund balance classification as reported in the financial statements. As you can see here, the vast majority of the fund balance was assigned as approved by the Finance Committee. And assigned fund balance is really fund balance that's designated for future purposes. And so I believe it's page 106 in the financial statements, gives more information on what makes up that assigned fund balance, but most of it is future operating requirements, capital items, and other carry forwards. Here on this slide, we have a quick snapshot of the net position of the delinquent tax revolving fund. As you can see, the fund did end the year with net position of $201 million. That was assigned for various reasons, most of which is delinquent tax receivables, both current and future. Next slide here, we have our data on the legacy cost, namely the employees retirement system, which is on the left, and the OPEB plan, which is the retiree healthcare on the right. And the green represents the total liability as calculated by the county's actuary, and the orange is the net position. So the assets that are in place for these liabilities. And you can see at September 30, the pension system was 99% funded, while the OPEB plan was 141% funded. Now, again, as I mentioned, a heck of a lot has happened since then. So these are all pre-market reaction to COVID, pre-market reaction to the oil situation. So if we were to take a snapshot of this today, it would look different than where you were at 7 months ago. So the county did end the year with deficits in two funds, and those would be the Lake Levels Act 146 and the Drain Chapter 4 construction. These funds were in deficits in prior years as well. And that's really, it's a timing deficit. So the money was spent on these projects in prior years, and then the county is recapturing the revenue through special assessments over time. And so these deficits will be reduced and eliminated over time as those assessments, as that revenue is collected. And then the last slide we have is really just a subsequent event, and we did have some language within the county's financial statements surrounding COVID and the fact that it certainly did have an impact, a significant impact on the investment portfolio, in particular the investments of the pension and retiree healthcare trust funds, just given what those funds are invested in, and the fact that at the time the financial impact overall to the county could not be estimated at that time. So with that, I will turn it over to Stacy to close us out. Thank you.
Thank you so much. In addition to the audited financial statements, there are some required communications that you received that I believe were approved in the communication section of your agenda this morning. I wasn't going to cover those in detail either, but if you do have any questions, we'd be happy to. It really just circles back on whether or not there were any challenges in reaching our audit opinion or problems with the audit process. And as you can see in the communications, we did not identify any internal control deficiencies as part of the audit process, nor were there any challenges related to our opinion. There are estimates as part of the county's audit, and those estimates do include some of those property tax valuations and the collectability of certain receivables within the county, as well as the more judgmental components of the investment portfolio in the retirement and retiree healthcare funds, which we've talked about in the past. We've reviewed those estimates and believe that the county's basis for those estimates are reasonable.
Okay, we'll open up for questions for the committee. A lot of information there. I know and pieces of this information has been rolled out over a period of time. I have one question. Are there any recommendations that you have? I mean, obviously you also do a lot of auditing for other, public entities in terms of improving our control and review. And I mean, one thing I kind of bring up in the context of all of this, and I know you're looking, you brought up the retirement board, and it's publicly known that an issue kind of came to surface is related to IRS compliance and appropriate disbursement of those funds that we have since, as soon as it came to our attention really last year, it immediately addressed it. Through the auditing process, do those things get discovered, and so I have really two questions. One, is there any suggestions that you have to really even further improve our fiscal practices? And two, any suggestion, how could we have identified that sooner and not decades later after it inadvertently occurred?
So I'll start, and Tim can provide some additional information as it relates to this specific instance. But as far as the internal control process, we do, as part of the audit, gain an understanding of the internal controls. And we don't issue an opinion on them, but if through that process we do identify areas for recommendation, we do bring those to both the management's attention as well as yours. One thing that we are talking to all of our clients about right now, as it relates to the environment that you're currently operating in, is that the control environment that you had in place before this pandemic hit, before going to a remote working environment, is different than the control structure that you need in a remote working environment. So while this is happening subsequent to the audit and we haven't had a chance to review those controls, one thing that we do highly recommend is looking at those controls that would be impacted or changed as part of moving to a remote environment, especially those controls related to segregation of duties and controls over assets, including cash functions, et cetera, and ensure that those controls under the new environment are still appropriate. And they're different, and it's difficult to ensure that, as everybody's responding to things, that they're also thinking about the control structure. So that is one piece, one area that I would strongly recommend that you focus on in the next few months. The other thing that we have on our radar and will be looking at very much throughout this next audit process, as Workday continues to get implemented and established, assuming that it's still implemented on the timeline that it was originally determined, is what are the changes in controls associated with Workday, and is that new control structure still appropriate as far as user access, rights, et cetera. So we'll be working with the team to ensure that our understanding of the revised controls is correct, and to determine if we have any suggestions as it relates to those. And Tim, can you comment on the retirement item?
And not really speak to what the retirement, I mean, everyone on this board, I mean, the committee knows what, I mean, we're talking about. I guess I'm speaking from an auditing perspective. For some of us, I mean, the board members, it was kind of like a surprise. It's something that's been in practice for a long time, and nothing done intentionally, but the series of circumstance over a long period of time. Is a function of questions that needed to be asked, things to be looked at, those type of things. I guess is what I'm looking for guidance from you, Tim.
Yeah, and I think from just a pure audit standpoint, I don't think that would have been something that we would have caught without it being brought to our attention, because our audit is more, as they said, we do look at the controls and the processes, but it's highly transaction driven. And so we do look at what happened and was it right? Was it properly accounted for? We do look for unrecorded items. So we talked with management, we talked with the attorneys and the TPAs just to see what else is out there. And that's through those discussions, that's where it would be brought to our attention. And in this case, my understanding it was a TPA switch that really brought this issue to light, and it was a different set of eyes saying something doesn't seem right here, and you know the history there. So that's where something like this would be brought to our attention through those discussions with either the attorneys or the TPAs.
All right, thank you, Tim.
You're welcome.
Any further questions for our auditors? Okay, seeing none. Stacy, Tim, thank you very much for being with us. I don't see any further discussion. So Pam, why don't we, a voice vote to receive and file the audit report, or do we need a physical vote? Just a voice vote will do. Okay. So all in favor of receiving and filing the audit, say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed,
Aye.
say nay. The ayes have it unanimously. The receiving and file. Stacy, Tim, thank you for being there. Thank you also for being responsive. Commissioners on the committee and the entire board always invited to reach out to you with questions as you guys continue to go through this process. So thank you very much for being with us.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
All right. Okay, that brings us, I think that to the next item on our agenda. Go back up here. My hyperlinks to get back to the top is not working. Okay. That brings us to item 16 on the agenda. This is miscellaneous resolution 20113, administration of surplus funds in the delinquent tax revolving fund policy. If I can move the resolution, moved by Commissioner Gingell, seconded by Commissioner Spiz. Commissioner Gingell, do you want to speak to? Right. Kind of put
Sure,
set up the
happy-
context.
I mean, I think most people are aware of it. It's just no particular issue. I think it's just a policy opportunity for the board to have additional oversight and to instill the responsibilities that we're all elected to instill regarding county spending, et cetera. So this is just beginning a policy relative to the DTRF surplus and instituting a way that the board has more visibility into it. And should there be a surplus, right now, the board has the ability to reallocate that as deemed fit according to certain rules. And that this resolution is just instituting a more formalized policy for the board. That helpful?
Yep, I think that's set up nicely, and I fully support. I think it's it's the right thing to do, and this board has the last couple of years have taken steps to improve transparency and board oversight, and I think it's directly in line with it and appropriate.
Mr. Chair?
I believe there's an amendment. Yeah.
Mr. Chair, I think we have an amendment that's clarification. Just wanted to help you out there.
There's an amendment, and I believe the amendment brought forth working with Corporation Counsel to make sure that language is consistent with that state law and so forth. Moved by the amendment that's in our packet. What page is that? My pages numbers aren't coming up. So, Mr. Ward, can you tell me what page?
At the very end.
At the very end, the very last thing. Okay. So everyone, I know it was circulated a couple days ago. The amendment moved by Commissioner Gingell, seconded by Commissioner Zach. for the amendment. I don't know, unless if people have got questions. Is there any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, Pam, you want to call the roll on the amendment?
And the amendment, Quarles,
Yes.
Spiz,
Yes.
Gershenson,
Yes.
Angel,
Yes.
Zach,
Yes.
Woodward,
Yes.
motion carried.
All right, the amendment passes. That moves us to the main motion before us. We already had a motion and a second. Seeing no further discussion, Pam, please call the roll.
On the resolution as amended, Commissioner Spiz,
Yes.
Gershenson,
Yes.
Angel,
Yes.
Zach,
Yes.
Quarles,
Yes.
Woodward,
Yes.
motion carried.
Sufficient number voting in the affirmative. The resolution is adopted. And that brings us to the last item on the agenda. We kind of started that conversation with our executive, but I do want to create the space for, I think, Sean. Sean, you're still on? Did I lose Sean? Did everyone leave?
Hillary's still there.
Hillary? Hillary, can I bring you on? See people. Okay.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yep. Thank. This was on the agenda. I know we touched on some of these things. I think stressing under. You heard. Hey. People's. Desire for planning, knowing what that is, and I think executive outlined some of the processes. But I do definitely want. Create the time if people had additional questions. I know Commissioner Gershenson had an additional question. So maybe I tee off Gershenson's question. And if there's any additional information on our planning process internally as it relates to the task force that we can share to make sure that Commissioner's questions are addressed. So Commissioner Gershenson, why don't I start with you, and then Hillary, if there's anything you want to add. Commissioner Gershenson.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to say I thought that the county exec's presentation was great. I love the thoughtfulness that went into the 3 steps that we're going to be taking, and starting out with this committee. I think it's great. I know several of the chairs of the committees, and I think that that it's a great bipartisan effort, which I'm really happy about. But I do hear amongst some of the voices on this committee, I feel that there's that rushing kind of bullying attitude that really offends me. I think that we need to be sure to be thoughtful and move forward in a thoughtful way and following the governor's orders. I know that Mayor Duggan said over the weekend that some of the committees, some of the cities that have opened up too early have had spikes. So I just want to be sure to articulate the voice that there are some members on this board that we all want everybody to get back to work, and we want to open up, of course, but we want to be sure that there isn't being pressure applied to do it quicker than is recommended.
Thank you, Commissioner. And before Hillary speaks, I think that there is, in the conversation, I think the executive is very clear. Like, we don't do the opening up of the economy and lifting the state order. It's not our jurisdiction. In our jurisdiction, what do we do in our state? And I think did an excellent job laying out. These are the things that we're going to be doing. Tip off this conversation is also, how do we gauge what our readiness is? And for me, it really breaks down to the 3 T's. It's testing, tracing, and treatment, and making sure that we have got enough tests. We have the tracing infrastructure. We have the treatment, making sure that our hospitals have the equipment, PPE, and all the other type of things to be able to do things in the context of the broader economy. And so there are things in there that definitely our readiness is important. And how do we make certain that we're preparing for that, and I know that our EOC has been preparing for that and doing all that work. That to me, this seems like making sure we're diligent in that space, in addition to all the work the task force and others are doing. So, Hillary, guys, kick it off to you. And I know they don't have like a formal agenda, but kind of respond to that and how you see the task force and other things moving forward in short order.
Okay, well, I would say, and thank you all for allowing Dave the time this morning to kind of lay out the budget context. He's very much wanted to do that. But I would say there's definitely two buckets. There's the bucket that April's working on in terms of the safe return of our employees. And so that's one separate bucket. And then there's the bucket of the task force that we've started with the conversations with the chairs, and we'll appoint the remaining members and hope to have a first meeting on Monday. And I think we have described the three areas: stabilization, recovery, and thrive. And the reason I think we had a conversation with the chairs yesterday, and Alan Karalik raised this. I mean, stabilization is maybe not the right word for that first bucket. It's almost stabilization and transition, because we want to be able to anticipate questions and issues and concerns that businesses might have as they're faced with reopening. And he's raised, and they have brainstormed a number of what those issues might be. And especially since we're talking about the whole range of companies. I mean, a Magna, they may already, because of their global presence and what they're seeing around the world, they may be further along. But some of our smaller businesses, might be needing more mentoring and more kind of peer-to-peer discussion with other business leaders about what they contemplate in terms of reopening. So that first bucket is a little bit of transition so that we can anticipate what people will need and how we can help them within the resources that we have. I mean, we do have to kind of keep in mind that we have EDCA staff that are experts in certain areas. And so we need to make sure that everybody understands the tools that we have in our toolbox and what other tools we might be able to maximize through some of the resources on the task force. But I think when we have an initial discussion, because of the wide representation on the task force, I mean, we will have, nonprofit leaders like United Way have agreed to participate, the banks, the credit unions, healthcare, restaurants, like a wide range, and then an assortment of different business leaders, Automation Alley. So we'll have about 20 people that represent the wide range of companies and operations, so that we can really focus in on stabilization, which is also transition, and then recovery. We hope and we think that Thrive, it really gets us back to where we started a month ago, which was the development of the new economic development strategy. I mean, that process was already underway. And our plan at the end of March was to kind of convene people that we had met with in January to review that draft economic development strategy. So we are asking Matrix, one of the consultants, to help facilitate the task force as well, so that we get through well these first two phases. Thrive really picks up where we were already at before COVID. So that's how we envision the task force.
Great. Thank you. Commissioner Gingell.
Yeah, so Hillary, I appreciate what you're saying, and the stages in that line of thinking, I don't disagree with you. I think as this committee task force meets, you're going to have a lot of people with a lot of opinions that probably aren't always going to agree. And I think it's going to be really in our best interest to put guidelines or suggestions out, unless we're officially going to require things. But we certainly need to be mindful and patient, but we also do need to have some urgency here too, because I believe the private sector is going to start opening up within the next couple of weeks. Manufacturing plants are going to come back online. The car companies can't keep these plants down forever. It is a killer for them, which also impacts the suppliers. And we have a lot of those in our area. And those companies are going to be coming back up to work, and those people are going to be going back to work, or they're going to be deemed unemployed officially outside of the PPE program. And so while testing and all that stuff, if it were an optimal situation and we tested everybody, yeah, that might be the optimal situation. The reality might be that a lot of our manufacturing entities are going to be coming up and back online by mid-May. And we need some, my thinking is just to provide guidelines around what people shouldn't do, how to do it.
Well, I would say, can I just jump in that? Because Fiz and I had this conversation, and I just want to make sure I understand what you're saying. I mean, what we saw, and I think very effectively here in Oakland County, what we've seen in the last 6 weeks now, I guess, is that oftentimes, we were ahead of some in terms of health orders. For example, Leanne Stafford really did issue the first health order regarding childcare facilities, so that staff and visitors were being screened there because the health department was really nervous and worried about those entities. And then, when the governor did this first stay-at-home order, Leanne again issued a health order around, okay, so you're an essential business and you're going to stay open, but what we'd like to see you do is screen your employees and also have some procedures for social distancing. So we were out front on that, and there might have been a little bit of, unease for a minute, but then you saw Kent and Washtenaw and Wayne all follow our lead and do the same thing. So, I mean, I think we have to kind of gauge, and then again, when the governor issued the second stay-at-home order, she actually really included a lot of those social distancing requirements. So she said to, the Lowe's, that there was some concerns about, you have to do this, you have to do that. So when we went and issued our third health order, asking these essential companies to, for example, implement facial coverings, which actually is not a requirement yet because we gave them a phase-in period. Again, we were kind of thinking ahead of what guidance do they need in terms of how they're operating. And Mike and I did talk about, is there a role, does the county want to think through from the perspective of those health orders and how we're handling it, once we know how the reopening is happening. But to a certain extent, the governor may, incorporate a lot of those things that we think make common sense, like screening your employees, having procedures in place so that, they're safe and they're not coming to work with symptoms or the like, or face masks or workspace things. So there may be a role that we can play, as I think real experts from our health department have played in the past in terms of leading in those areas. But I don't know is that what you mean?
Yeah, it is. And the other thing that I mean is that, to me personally, it would be best if the state actually had guidelines that were reasonable and made sense. And I know there's plans that are being worked on. And if in fact those are things we can piggyback, so that's one less piece of information consumers are trying to digest and figure out which one's real, which one's not, I think that would be better. The only point I'm making is when I think about Oakland County, it's opening up our internal operations. It's getting our employees to come back to work. It's getting the public to be able to come in and engage with our operations. And then it's about the economy and the companies in Oakland County beginning to open up. And there's a lot of that we're not going to be able to control.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So I know we're going to talk a lot about it in a task force. I don't need to take up any more time here. I just think these are things that it's going to be a balance between urgency, patience, and wisdom.
And any other commissioners? I mean, okay, Commissioner.
I'd just like to add on to that, and I agree with Commissioner Gengel. It's going to be patience. It's going to be safety. And, Marcia, I'm not trying to bully anybody, but I'm a realist also. The deadline's coming and approaching quickly, and people are getting frustrated out there. And if we don't have a plan and the date comes and we don't have the plan out soon, people are going to do what they want to do, right? They're going to do what they think is best, because we're already starting to see that. People are already disobeying all the orders out there by the governor, by the county. You still see people congregated in large groups all over the place. And I have a fear that's going to get worse and worse the longer we don't put some type of plan out there and some type of recommendations about all this stuff. That's my worry. And then you're going to see a peak, guaranteed. I'm not trying to bully, But I want to see
But Mike,
plan.
I would say the only thing I would challenge you on that is I do think you've seen a difference at grocery stores and the larger retailers. I mean, I know from a week's time, and I try not to go to the grocery store too much, but I know from a week's time it was very different at my grocery store than it was before in terms of
And I-
plexiglass, in terms of masks. So
And
I
I
mean,
will
I
give
do
you that.
think
That is
that
true.
our messages are being reiterated, and I do think
And
that
I
we
think
have
all
to
that's true,
balance.
but-
I do think we have to balance, you know, what the employer needs and what the public is going to need in terms of feeling, because we do get a lot of comments. You know, you forwarded me one, right? I mean, I think that person had that demonstrated kind of the anxiety. I think that will be out there that we have to address in terms of how are they going to be safe when they go out.
And I fully agree with all of that. And just to me, it's a timing thing. And I'm not, again, not trying to push it, but you know, everybody's going around this May 1st date. You know, so, and that's just over a week away.
And I see Commissioner Gershenson for a second time, so I want to recognize her. But I think it's also important that I want to push back against that there is no plan, because there actually are orders in place. There are the additional orders that we've put forth that I think are models that should be incorporated any future thing going forward. The required screening and record of all employees that come back that interface with the public. I mean, we were the first to get out there and limit restaurant, occupancy. So, I mean, delay and all those type of things. And so, like, those things are in place.
Those are in place. Again, Dave, if I may interrupt, I agree with you. They're in place today. And my belief is some of those, and I talked to Hillary about this, some of those should be in place as we start to phase in and open up. But that hasn't been, I haven't seen that anywhere. Maybe it's just me, but I'm anxious to see that type of plan going forward. Here's what we think we're going to be doing. You know, it'll change because it always does. But, you know, yes, we're doing stuff today, but as of May 1st, what are we doing?
Well,
or as of the opening date, what are we doing?
I guess I underscore Oakland County doesn't open up. I mean, the state will make the decision of what opening up looks like, likely a phased approach from everything that's being said. And we respond in there. And for public health professionals, from Dr. Faust to Leanne Stafford to Kathy Fordsley, the executive office has been on the front line, really pushing the envelope in terms of like helping shape those policies. And we're going to continue to do so. And this task force is not going to be sitting back waiting to do something. We are doing that. And I think it's important to realize, and all of us who want to be part of the solution are actively participating and bringing those things in. So I can say I hear the anxiousness, like what's next and all those types of things. I think it's important. I think it's also important to recognize, yes, things are in motion. There is a sense of urgency. No one's sitting on their laurels waiting like we're just gonna wait to see what happens. Everything Oakland County has done has been proactive, and almost always it's been ahead of the curve. So ahead of the curve to flatten the curve. I think that's important to recognize. I know everyone on this committee and everyone on our board has demonstrated the support to protect the public health. And all of us want to make certain that we can get back to whatever the new normal is, as close to normalcy as quickly as possible in the safest way, because we don't want to spike. Commissioner Gershenson.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that I think this planning is absolutely essential, and I'm totally supportive of the plan in place. In my world, people are following the governor's directive. I think that from people I'm hearing from, they want this reopening to be done thoughtfully and carefully and following the guidelines from the health experts. And it's not all about the economics of it, although it's definitely a part of it. So I wanted to reiterate that I'm very supportive of the team that's in place. And we were leaders in the whole state. The Attorney General came out and said they were looking at what Oakland County was doing. I have tremendous faith in our team.
All right, we're all in this together. Any other further discussion here? Okay, this is not the end of this conversation, obviously. I mean, by the end of this month, I mean, we're going to have the details of what internal county operations look like. I wouldn't be surprised if we started hearing some recommendations from this build out of the task force of some things that we can start be doing. We're not going to wait for a final report and recommendations. These recommendations will be brought forward to us, the executive, and all the appropriate people on there. So Hillary, thank you. Thank you for making time.
You're welcome.
Okay. Seeing no further business on the agenda, I will adjourn at 11:42 p.m. Thank you, everybody.
All right, thanks.
Later.
everybody.
Stay healthy.